Uh, so this question is, are there any aspects or indications that people can observe that would suggest we are making progress or improving our practice of meditation, even though it seems difficult to maintain or preserve mindfulness? A lot of people they've been practicing meditation for a long time, but still they have lots of hindrances and they might not be attaining as deep a meditation or what they might have read in books, haven't attained the jhanas yet or haven't gotten any psychic power and so on. Now, there is a way you can tell. It's called the mirror of the Dhamma, if you're making progress. And it doesn't necessarily mean how deep of meditation you've got. Even if you're just practicing the precepts and you avoid killing, lying, slandering, cheating, intoxicating the mind and breaking the precepts. And maybe before that you had a lot of guilt, worry, remorse, and fear and of getting caught, being found out for doing something, or just a lot of restlessness, maybe lots of anger and resentment, easily getting arguments with people. But then as you practice, even though you might not be attaining any deep states of meditation or seeing white light in the mind and so on, that's a lot of people, say they experience. Oh, I didn't see that. So they think they're not meditating properly. That's not an indication of progress. It's if over time, over months and years, you notice that you're less angry, you're less argumentative, you're less restless, you're less addicted to cravings and so on. And your mind is more peaceful. Maybe your health improves on that. These are the progress in Dhamma, more than just those other things I mentioned, or at least the very practical advancements in Dhamma, because that is, the whole practice of Dhamma is about overcoming suffering, not about seeing white lights in the mind or gaining psychic power over others or levitating or whatever else you might have read. It's being more contentment and, just more agreeable and pleasant and things like that. So these are indicators. These should be the indicators. Not whether you can sit 3 hours without moving and so on. Like you see some people, maybe, wow, they're such an advanced meditator. Yeah, but what's in their mind? A person could sit rock still for a long period of time, and it doesn't necessarily mean their mind is in a jhana. Although it very well could be, but still it may not. So anyway, those are the indicators of progress. And, if that's all it is, you should be content with, you should just keep doing what you're doing. And at a certain point, if other conditions are right, then your meditation, probably will improve over time. But everyone's different, and you can't compare yourself with others, what other people have told you about their progress and what they've seen in meditation and so on. It's just that, are you more comfortable in your own skin? And especially, have that not being so nervous, neurotic habits, and especially being able to follow the precepts kind of almost naturally, where you wouldn't even have to try to control yourself, weakening those urges and, your anger and resentment, and ill will. Is the universe an object or a subject? Hmm. Well, it depends on your point of view, but most scientists see it as an object, right? They see the sun, the solar system, they count the planets, they say, oh, this star is 1,000 light years away. That's their universe, right? In cosmic terms. So for them, it's an object. But if you attain the state of like infinite consciousness, formless jhana, or even if you attain present moment awareness, where the subject and object divisions, the ego consciousness fades away, then I would say it's neither an object or a subject, but it's kind of an object, but the subject has vanished. So it's very difficult to try to define that and put a word on it. But especially if you attain like formless jhanas, where you are experiencing infinite consciousness, there's a jhana called infinite consciousness, which would probably, just for a comparison with English words or so, probably be the closest thing that you could come to that would be a sense of the universe. And that's about the best explanation I think anybody could give on that. So,
isn't it the universe is an object and a subject? If you go plant a tree, so you will be the subject and the universe is an object because you are acting on the universe or on nature. And then when the tree grow and give us fruit, so universe become a subject and we are the object.
Don't make life too complicated. You're complicating things by, tree is a tree. We plant the tree, people enjoy it, okay. Don't create some mythology around it and so on. Sure, it's there and it will last for hundreds of years for people to enjoy it. Just like the Buddha established the Dhamma. And people are using it for 2,600 years after he passed away. And if anybody's mind has become universal, it's not even the Buddha, because he doesn't exist as an individual anymore. Although there are different interpretations, Mahayanas have different interpretations of the mind and the cosmos and what happens to the mind after death and all that. But I'm going to get into those sort of cosmological, comparisons or so on. Yeah. Where did you learn the standing meditation and its origin? Or was it something you felt worked intuitively? I learned it from the Buddha. Read the Satipatthana Sutta, right? Standing, walking, sitting, lying down, develop this mindfulness in all four postures. The Buddha taught that, but a lot of people don't practice it. Because somehow in the teaching of the Buddha, this emphasis on just sitting. But the Buddha walked hours every night. And he probably alternated standing too, although he doesn't specifically mention it. But in the third watch of the night, he paced up and down for hours, between 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning until 3 in the morning, or something like that. Anyway, sometime. And all the monasteries have walking paths in them. You go to Sri Lanka, you go to Thailand, you go to Burma, they all have walking paths. And with a seat at the end. So they sit 1 hour, they get up and they walk. But I found that standing, and when I walked the end of the path, before turning around, I stopped and stood for several minutes because it's very powerful. And to let the self go, and there's just standing without the self of me standing and so on. And so when you practice it in all four postures, there's a continuum running through it. If you only practice when you're sitting, what happens when you stand up and start walking? There's a little me there. So you got to practice it in all four postures so that all your bases are covered. At any time, you've already practiced. There is no self. There is no. There's just feeling, feeling, hearing, hearing, seeing, seeing, tasting, tasting. No me doing it, and no objects that are being done. It's just consciousness. So that is how a person has to cultivate. I mean, if you want to make it continuous, that's the reason so many people they only get so far in meditation because they think it's just done sitting. They have this obsession with attaining jhanas or something. When they get that, they just enjoy that, and then you get up and they don't continue it for the most part, probably. I can't talk for everybody, but still, it's sort of a perceived idea. So in mindfulness, the Buddha wanted us to practice in all four postures, because that way all your bases are covered. There's no reason why you can't meditate. Standing in line at the supermarket, just close your eyes, feel your feet on the floor, take a couple deep breaths, be aware of hearing people shouting and talking, smells, opening your eyes every couple of seconds. Oh, yeah, take a step forward, being in the present moment. If you've never been told about it, you're not going to do it. But we have to take advantage of all the short little moments during the day, all the free 1 or 2 minutes here and there, where there's nothing to do. What do people do? Oh, what is that? They let their mind wander because they haven't been taught they can just keep their mind in their head. You can do it standing too. It can be very powerful. Actually, tomorrow in the closing talk, I'll talk about that. It's called M&Ms. Practice of taking an M&M every hour. All right. By the way, anybody like that standing meditation? Standing work? Pretty cool. Just standing, hearing, feeling. Do it anytime, any place. Is there a particular significance for the number of days the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree? Yeah, I can't. Don't ask me that. Ask Bhante. He sat under the Bodhi tree as long as it took to get Mara out of his mind and attain enlightenment. Whether what exact days is and that, I think that's just is what it is. Any comments?
There are a few suttas from the Buddha reported, about his enlightenment experience and how he spent afterwards.
Yeah, sure. He spent a week at this tree and that tree and some other places, and but that was just enjoying the bliss of his enlightenment.
Yes.
So gradually, after 6 weeks, he kind of wore off, and then he started to go out and teach.
Probably he might have been contemplating also how to, put his teaching into words. He had to organize this realization into, concepts and words, which is very challenging.
All right, yeah, because
he go out teach, and he was maybe thinking how I can now organize this and put into words.
Do you do TM or only Vipassana meditation? Should we use mantras when meditating to get to samadhi? Is TM harmful? Look, my first ever meditation was TM. When I got out of the army, In 1971, TM was at its height of popularity in America. Many of you probably don't even know that because you weren't here. But
you have to explain what is TM.
TM is Transcendental Meditation. It was invented by this Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. The Beatles practiced that. That's how the Beatles got famous. They went to India and practiced transcendental meditation with this Maharishi. And then it came to America and it was taught in the universities and became very, very popular. And I had just gotten out of the army and I heard about that. And I was, it pricked my interest. And I went to the lectures. And, these Western disciples who had practiced the TM, they're giving talks about it. They talked about the field of all possibility. And it's very nice. So I signed up, paid my $35 fee, student discount, and went to the initiation and got my little mantra and I started practicing. And it had some effect. It's basically you just repeat this. It's supposed to be a secret mantra given to each person, and you repeat it silently in your mind, like Om, 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 or some other syllables, Sanskrit syllables. And if you do that long enough, you can gain, yes, jhana. Most people probably don't gain the jhana, but at least you can calm the mind and you can gain concentration and you get the effects of that. But yeah, you could attain jhanas even doing that. But I didn't practice it long enough because I was planning a trip to India. And also all my friends were still smoking pot and partying. And they kept on saying, come on, give up that meditation, come on. But anyway, I continued it. But then when I left the States to go on my world journey of hitchhiking, being a wandering hippie and hitchhiking across Europe to India, I let it go. But I knew from the little experience that I had that there was something to meditation. But I was honest with myself and said, I'm going to have to wear out all this partying and being a hippie stuff, and then maybe I'll get back to it. And that's exactly what happened. 2 years later, I finally got to India after being put in prison in Afghanistan.
Through grounds, right? Through grounds. Europe to India through grounds.
On the ground, overland.
Hitchhiking.
Without cell phone, without reservation, without nothing. No internet. Anyway, that was a different world back then. Anyway, so I knew I would probably get back to meditation, but I just didn't know when. But then the time was right. I got put in prison in Afghanistan and I barely got out with my life. And I said, I got to get off drugs. I got to change my life. And shortly after that, I heard about meditation and my heart just jumped out of the chest saying, that's what I got to do. And I went to this 1 month meditation course in Nepal. And after 2 weeks of listening to the Dhamma, I had a powerful transforming experience. It just unscrewed my head or turned it around 180 degrees. And I never looked back. And I went to Sri Lanka and became a monk. Anyway, so I'm just saying that to show that, that meditation of TM, I wouldn't say it's dangerous or harmful, but it's, it can be an introduction for people, but it's, the way they package it, and it's about improve your business and, all this kind of really mundane things, although they do talk about spiritual aspects of it, but I doubt if many people really attain enlightenment by practicing that, because it's mostly a concentration technique. But it did open a door there to meditation. But then it was the Buddhist Dhamma that really got me, because there's a lot more wisdom in the Buddhist teaching. And look, I went to my first ever meditation course was 1 month long. And I was just, sitting around somewhere and somebody said, oh, there's a meditation course. And I said, Oh, I want to go. They said, well, it's a month long. I said, who cares? And I just went. Here, if you tell somebody, oh, there's a weekend meditation, a weekend, oh my gosh, they fret and worry and sweat over one day meditation, right? And I just 1 month didn't even think about it, just go. And it worked out.
Bhante, that's because you were a hippie.
Wait till my autobiography comes out. You can read all about it. With a lot of pictures too. All right. Now the mantras, because TM is using a mantra, but it's basically to gain concentration. You're just repeating a word. And the word has a kind of a meaning to it, but you're just and you can attain the first jhana and even more jhanas perhaps if you really develop it. But it's mainly a concentration technique. And like today, before the meditation or before the Dhamma talk, what did I chant?
No.
Now, if I kept repeating that, that would be like a mantra, but it has a very powerful meaning. So if you understand the meaning and you're chanting, it can help to bring your mind to that kind of, vibration or experience. If you understand the meaning of it, but still, it just basically it helps you to concentrate and to, bring the mind to stillness. But then you have to go on and develop, at least following the Buddhist teaching of, develop insight into anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So the same with the jhanas, just practicing the jhanas by themselves. Unless you go on to develop insight from that, the jhanas are not going to be all that useful. So all these various things that you hear in spirituality, becoming a vegetarian, following precepts, chanting a mantra, doing puja, all these things are simply kind of supports or helps to gradually get the mind and body relaxed enough, and so that you can effectively then concentrate and to go beyond the conditioned mind. But you have to kind of know the process involved, because the mind can take you into various cul-de-sacs and dead ends. That's why the right understanding of the Dhamma, the Eightfold Path, right understanding, it comes first. We may talk about that more tomorrow. How do you mindfully drive? My husband wants me to know. He wants to know how I mindfully drive. How does he know I drive? I do drive once in a while. I mindfully drive by keeping my eyes on the road and being aware of, sort of defensive driving and paying attention, not letting the mind get lost in thoughts and then not seeing something, getting in an accident. So it just means being awake and clear and not letting your mind go to sleep or get lost in thoughts that you momentarily lapse and don't see some dangers that are happening, somebody coming into your lane or somebody stopped right in front of you, and if you're not mindful, you might have crashed into them or something. So like that, you have to drive mindfully, being alert and aware. But when you come to stoplights and other things, you can just sit there and just feel the body pressing on the seat, feel your hands on the steering wheel, just being aware of the present moment. When the light turns green, and I'll keep going. And there's no miracle about that. But I wouldn't necessarily try to meditate and chant mantras or be breathing, because if you get too concentrated, you could lose your alertness, and then something could happen. Is it our nervous system that is reading the vibrations within ourselves, as well as the nervous system of others? Well, when I mention, like, be aware of the vibration, it means basically, just feeling them. But you can understand them. Part of the right understanding or the investigation of Dhamma is understanding what is a vibration. What are these painful and pleasant sensations or vibrations? What are they composed of? How we react to them? So by observing, you understand that, a certain contact comes, or by sitting longer, all of a sudden you start to get a painful vibration in the body. And what is that? Anybody have an idea what is the painful vibration of the body? Just think about it logically. This body is made up of what?
Nerves.
Cells, molecules, atoms, electrons. So all electrons vibrate, right? You see them buzzing around the nucleus, right? You don't see them, but you've seen diagrams, right? So that's vibration. And there's billions of them inside this one body, and they're all vibrating. And sometimes they produce pain. If the muscles and joints are stiff and they're, have a certain vibration, it produces a painful or unpleasant feeling. So we understand that. Oh, there's this unpleasant vibration there. And it's because of stiffness, or your legs are not conditioned right, or just the fact that you're sitting longer, there's going to be pain, because that's the nature of the body. So you understand it that way. That's the way you read the vibration. But you understand this vibration is impermanent, is changing, is not going to kill you. Relax around it. So observe how it ebbs and flows, and eventually it changes and disappears, for the most part. Or if it doesn't disappear, you get bored watching it, you feel some other sensation. You don't have to keep watching one sensation all the time. And then there's pleasant sensation arise. You understand, how does this pleasant sensation arise? These are the Buddha's instructions on the 5 aggregates. He understands this is pleasant sensation. Meditator understands, how does this pleasant sensation arise? Because of contact, because whatever the object is and your past history with it, you like it. And then it changes and it goes away. It can't hold it forever. And some other sensation arises. And what is pleasant for you may not be pleasant for another person. So, all objects, everybody has a different reaction to different objects. Now, in some of my other retreats, I tell my famous avocado story. How many know my avocado story? Famous avocado story. Only one? Well,
It's worth repeating.
you want to hear that?
Yeah.
Because it's very instructive. Okay.
So tomorrow had a very helpful.
So when I was young, I lived in California, and we lived near an avocado orchard. And my mother was a school teacher, and she knew avocados were healthy. And she usually served avocados 2 or 3 times a week with a salad in the season. But for some reason, I didn't like avocados. And I hated avocados. I thought they were evil. And just the fact that my mother was saying we're having avocados for dinner, go fetch one from the orchard. A shiver went up my spine, just hearing the word avocado. Then I started worrying, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I went and found our cat who was outside and bring him inside the house. I'll tell you that story later. And then at dinner, the mother brought the avocados to the table and I saw them. And another shiver went up my spine. Then I brought it to the nose and smelled it, and another shiver went up my spine. Sometimes, a gag reflex. Then when I put it in the mouth and actually chewed it, sometimes I vomited. And so I suffered 5 ways from the avocado. I suffered by hearing the word. I suffered by seeing it. I suffered by smelling it. I suffered by tasting it, and suffered by thinking about it. It was self-created. There's one way I didn't have a reaction to it. If I rubbed it on my arm, I didn't really have a reaction to it. But anyway, 5 ways I suffered because I thought I was clinging to the idea that avocados were evil. But my father, my brother, my mother, they loved avocados. So avocados were inherently bad or evil. Everybody should experience them in the same way, don't you think? So that goes to show you that it's in the mind. Our mind is creating by clinging to the perception. So this is not the end of the story. So my family finished the avocados. They all went into the den to watch Leave It to Beaver, the TV programs back in the 50s and 60s. And I was sitting there staring at my plate, suffering. But then fortunately, the cat was under the table and he liked avocados. So I used to feed the cat avocados under the table. And then after the parents, went into the den, I finished feeding the cat the avocados. And then I took my plate to my mom and said, Ma, I finished my dinner. And she said, oh, good little boy. So what did I do? I lied to my mother. Can you believe that? Lying to your mother?
And you stole an avocado.
Well, I didn't worry about that. They were just laying on the ground. Anyway, so that's the point. Because we cling to our ideas that these things are ultimately good and I want them, but develop craving and attachment to them. You'll fight, lie, cheat, steal, rape, pillage, and plunder to get the object of your desire because you're clinging to that perception that it's going to bring you pleasure, even though afterwards it's going to bring you a lot of pain. But people don't think that far in advance. But then later, when I went to India and I learned the Dhamma, even before I became a monk, and I went to a yoga ashram, and the yoga teacher was extolling the virtues of avocado. So I said, I got to change my mind about avocados. All these people are saying avocados are good. I've been suffering for so many years. So then let me prove that this Dhamma works. The scientists were telling you can't change the mind. You can't change the mind. It's hardwired. But the Buddhas and the yogis said, yeah, you can. Reprogram the mind. I said, let me try that. So I sat down, I got a bag of avocados and went to work. And first I had to mix the avocado with other food, hold my nose, and put it in it, gag a bit. But I kept on telling myself, it's all in the mind, it's all in the mind. Avocados are good, avocados are good. And little by little, over a few days, those reactions started to get less and less. And I could, even take my fingers off my nose and start reducing the amount of food I mixed in with it. And over a couple of weeks, I could start eating them kind of clean. And then I actually began liking them later on. I mean, this, took us some time, and I overcame that aversion to them. Now I love avocados. Everywhere I go, people are giving me avocados. But that was a very important experience, because if you can do it for avocados, you could probably do it for other things too that you have aversion to, right? Because everyone has their own avocados, right? Different types of food you don't like, or music you don't like, or people you don't like, but it's all in the mind. That's the important thing. It's all created in our mind. Because if everybody's the same, everybody would act and like the same things. But we know that's absolutely false. In every culture and every person, if we put one item out in front of you, every person's going to have a different idea about it. What kind of music, what kind of food, what kind of pictures, ideas, philosophical ideas, conspiracy theories, Trump, Biden, whatever, right? People fight. For what? Just for some imagination in their mind. So that's the real important thing to understand. And when you get an insight into that, then that's like a huge boulder being pushed off your shoulders. But usually that will come as an insight into meditation. If you practice meditation enough, you'll get eventually some aha moments where that became crystal clear in your mind, and all your doubts get dispelled, and after that, meditation becomes much more easier. Anyway, sorry to bore you with all those.
No, that's fun.
Dhamma is fun. That's right. We got to make it fun. People think, Dhamma, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that.
Or suffering.
What is the I am that is in all of us? Is it not, I'm not sure what this word is, some kind of energy, I don't know, I can't read that word anyway. But anyway, what is the I am? It's an idea. And I mentioned how that comes to the baby. Comes to the baby because you give it a name, and you start putting things in front of it, and then you start getting pleasurable and painful reactions to those things, and then as it develops over a few years, gradually that sense of I am, it starts to coagulate behind the eyes, because people calling its name, and it's starting to look and look and look. And it sees things and it starts crawling forward. So this sense of I'm some kind of a person in here gets developed. That's how it arises. Now, don't get me mistaken now. The baby was born with ignorance, because every person is born because they still have karmic accumulation and ignorance. So the baby isn't some innocent, pure little angel being there. He still has the seed of defilements in the mind. That's why they were born. But in the first few months after birth, when those defilements are still sort of sleeping in the unconscious mind, then they don't manifest so much. But as it starts to awaken and experience the world again for 9 months out of the year, 9 months in the womb, it didn't know nothing about this world, right? And so it takes time for gradually those memories and vibrations of the world that maybe it experienced in the previous life to start gradually awakening when he sees objects again. And then the latent repressed desires and aversions and ignorance that were sleeping in the unconscious, they gradually come back up. And it's because the societies basically encourage that. Encourage desire, aversion, ego. And so the babies kind of helped us to prevent that. Although if they're trained from they're very young, they have stand a better chance not to get too much sucked into that world of conditioning. Let's say if the parents were Buddhists and meditators and they taught the child to meditate from when they were a young age, they have to stand a better chance to retaining that and then using that as they reach puberty and going into young adult life. Those whatever they experience they might have had from a past life then starts coming back too. Just like the defilements might start coming back, whatever wisdom that you might have learned in a past lifetime, like that's what I think what happened to me. You know, I didn't know anything about Dhamma for 25 years. But once I heard the Dhamma, it was like a floodgate was opened in the heart and was like, wow, where's this been all my life? And I just took to it like a fish with water, in the water. Now, that doesn't happen to everybody, but I feel it was because probably in a previous life, I had, probably lived in India, Sri Lanka, because those are my two favorite countries, India and Sri Lanka. And, and so I was probably, it took, my being a hippie and going to India was to experience all the drugs and fun and games on the way, because that's what the hippies were doing. But that was like the carrot, dangling a carrot in front of the donkey. Because if you had told me go to India to find a guru, I'd say, what? And go experience all the drugs, live naked on the beach in Goa, party? Oh, yeah. Right? Those are the hippie times, right? But so it was like a carrot dangling in the front. So I took it. But when I got to India and I heard the Dhamma, the conditions were right, something opened up. So, that doesn't happen to everybody. But it does happen to people. All of you have your own experience. How did you first get into Dhamma? Everybody's got their own experience. And so we have to protect that. It's very precious. Because there's a lot of forces in the external world that don't want you to change. Because people don't want to be a fool. They see somebody trying to change and they have to look at themselves. Why am I still doing these things? You see, they don't want to look at them. Although some do, of course. But, so, these are the forces that are working against us. That's why the practice of Dhamma requires, the Buddha devised the whole Eightfold Path is covering all the bases in the world of trying to protect this, the young shoot of the Dhamma, spiritual, wisdom that's trying to arise. People are trying to suppress it, but other people are trying to foster that seed to keep growing. And that's what the practice of Dhamma is. Please give me some tips. Be mindful while I am doing my daily activity. Is it possible to meditate while you are doing some activity like while cooking? Well, there's a saying in Zen, when you're carrying water, just carry water. Chopping wood, just chop wood. That means be in the present moment. When cooking, cutting vegetables, just be aware, be focused on where you're supposed to be cutting, be aware of your movements. Don't, get too fast that you're going to slip and cut your finger. Be mindful. Don't do that. It's because people are thinking about their date tonight or something that happened yesterday that they get distracted and they miss. They cut the finger or something else. Or you're walking too fast and step in some water or slip and fall back and crack your head. So many accidents, as I mentioned. All accidents are caused by not being mindful. So you can be mindful while doing activities, but you have to just slow down a little bit. You have to slow down enough that you're kind of, in touch with, in a relaxed mood. Not focused on the goal or where you're going, but focused on the journey is important, not the destination. It's the journey that's important. Because if you're aware step by step, you'll reach the destination. But if you're focused on a destination and you don't look where you're stepping, you might fall in a hole or get killed. Right? So that's how we have to practice. Is it okay to feel our energies rotating right side of our body? I don't know exactly what you mean by rotating on the right side of our body. I mean, there's so many different sensations. Even when we say energies, basically it's just sensations. I mean, it's vibrations of cells, molecules, atoms, however you want to imagine it. And we call that energy, yeah. It's what quantum physics is, smashing the atom. So, they're very powerful. But when you feeling those vibrations, you don't have to make big storylines out of them, It's just to hold your attention in the present moment and not being carried away by the pleasant ones or the painful ones, and just experiencing them, each one, as they're consistently changing, without grasping or without trying to hold them or without trying to push them away. So the painful ones, we endure them with mindfulness and awareness. Just know that that's what it is. It's a painful sensation caused by sitting too long in one place, or maybe there's a bee stinging you, or it's because of that. Or because there's a big noise going on and you're getting angry about that and feeling heat in the body. Okay, there's a cause of that. You understand how these sensations arise, how they affect your mind, and how if you react to them, they're going to keep affecting your mind. But if you develop equanimity and just see them as just for what they are, impermanent, without reacting to them, feeding them, they'll vanish. And the mind will be left in the present moment, floating from moment to moment, without getting caught and sunk underneath by our reaction to pains or getting carried away in our thoughts of jealousy, envy, fear, greed, hatred, or whatever, pride. And so all these things carry our mind in all kind of different directions, cause suffering of one kind or another. And so, it's just a training. I mean, it's a training, and it has to be done every day because we forget very quickly. So that, the practice of meditation really becomes a lifelong practice. It has to be something like brushing your teeth or taking a bath every day. You have to see it as that important, or even more important, is the practice of mindfulness. It's a brain exercise. We're strengthening our brain. That means the ability to be alert, the ability to not react by using the mindfulness and by using that anchor to the body. By being, the more sensations you can notice, especially the breathing and those subtle or pleasant sensations, that acts as an anchor. So when something starts grating at you, some pain or some other noises going on outside, loud noises or smells or even thoughts in your mind, as long as you're holding on to those subtler sensations, you won't be carried away by them. And if you have enough patience, they're going to vanish because they're impermanent. And so that's why patience is very important. And you have to have mindfulness to and have something, need something to hold your mind. If you don't, then the mind gets carried away. That's why we have to have that, either the breathing or some other sensations in the body, which is connected to the present moment. And just, keep it there as long as possible. And that will outlast the impermanence, because those subtle vibrations are basically permanent. All the sensations, individual sensations are changing, but because they're continually being more sensations are following, it's like there's a constant subtle vibration there. It's deeper than all the other things going around. And once we can tune into that, we know how to tune into it, then, that, becomes your anchor. And because everything else comes and goes, that painful sensation will come and go. Your thoughts will come and go, as long as you don't feed them. They'll vanish very quickly. Because things only exist as we pay attention to them. Yes.
The vibrations that you're mentioning about, would you call them the Pali term piti?
Well, piti means the pleasant sensation. So yes, the pleasant sensations that you're feeling kind of emanating up from a artesian well. The Buddha gave these very beautiful similes for piti and sukha. He gave when you attain the first jhana, you get piti and sukha, born of being secluded from the sensory impressions. And he gave the description of being submersed in a warm bubble bath. In the bath water, just full of, bubbly, warm suds. You can imagine yourself submerged up to the chin in warm, lukewarm water. Your whole body is, he has you imagine that every cell in your body is drenched, permeated, and suffused with the rapture and bliss born of seclusion. Such a powerful image, right? But it's real. If you've attained that. And that's why it's so intoxicating, and people get attached to that. But even that is, changes too. And then he gives a second jhana as when that piti and sukha goes down, or the piti goes down, which is kind of like the thrilling sensations, like the hair standing on end, you get shivers up your spine and so on. That's kind of like the piti is these kind of sensations. Then they pass off. And then it said, if you can imagine a lake with no outlets, but there's an artesian well in the bottom of the lake that's gushing up cool water, and you were just sitting in there, and your whole body was drenched and suffused with that cool, tranquil sensation of just being submersed in that. You can imagine that. That's the sukha. And he gives similes for the other ones. But so those are, very powerful images. And they're not any images, but they're experiences. But even those are imperfect. But the Buddha said that is innocent pleasure. You don't get that by raping somebody else. You get that as coming up from within you. And most people get their pleasure by all these external erotic things or other sensual stimulations, right? The whole economy is based on all this stuff. But the rapture and bliss that comes from meditation is innocent because it's part of nature. And that's why he said this kind of pleasure shouldn't be avoided or shouldn't be shunned, but shouldn't be attached to it either. But anyway, friends, finally reached the end. So all those were good questions. I don't know if the answers were good, but so we still want to have our final meditation tonight, or it gets too late. I'm sorry it went over a little bit. So Let's try to let go of all that external focus. Just take a deep, slow breath. Hold in the breath. Try to let go of that, all that excitement. Hold the breath in your lungs a few seconds to calm down. And if you need to stand up because of some pain, go ahead and stand up on your own. But because the time is kind of short, for those who are okay, just continue sitting. Go into your meditations, do some 3-part breathing. But if you want, you can stand up to relieve any pain you might be having and then sit down again when you're ready. Can these bright lights be turned down? Maybe that bright one is.
The switch of the light. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, just do some 3-part breathing. Trying to get recentered in the breathing body.